Based on what you just saw, you can see that there is some time saving. Here's just kind of a quick metrics of how many user inputs and button clicks that are eliminated using the simplified setup. Based on a few questions, you can move through the process much quicker, create your calendars, unit of measures, organizations, and of the underlying information. So it is very helpful. So what about managing data setup? So you can use the functional area for the offerings. You can use the implementation project. You can bulk upload with your CSV files. You can copy data. Lots of things you can do. Once you're in the setup and maintenance work area, you can and will create your business units. So here's an example. Click on the link for business units and open up the details and search for your business units. Remember, when you're setting up tasks within the system, to do them in the order in which they're presented. That way you'll make sure that you don't skip any of the prerequisites. You've got the ability to opt into features to minimize any wasted setup time. You have direct access to the setup pages, which enables managing the setup data in that correct sequence. And then you have the list of required tasks to make sure that everything gets done properly. So here's different views or options. You can do things based on the functional area. So you can go in and set up the offerings, configure your opt-in selections for the functional areas, make sure you get the features that you wanted enabled. You can adopt as you go if that makes sense in your world. Or you can use the implementation project, which allows you to define the project and manage all your tasks within the system to make sure that everything within the project is set up, done, assign the task to the proper users, and just make sure that they have access to whatever it is you want them to set up. And you can monitor the process when you use the implementation project pretty easily. In order, or rather the order of the setup sequence helps avoid dependency errors. So make sure that you do things in the prescribed manner. You can click on the shared links. That'll take you into the functional areas. If a setup task is mandatory, there will be a little asterisk in there so you can see it and make sure it gets done. And there's just an example of a shared offering for the catalogs, which are used in both product management and order management. When a functional area is selected, the related set of tasks are listed in the task section. The screenshot depicts the facilities functional area, so the things that need to be set up for that within the inventory organization. And then you can see that in the functional area, mandatory setups are shown. You can leverage the drop-down list to select all the tasks to display. And the display order of the tasks reflects the sequence in which they should be performed to address any data dependencies. And you can drill down on the tasks to open the appropriate page. Some of the tasks require a context called scope. So before their setup data is entered, if a setup data segment by specific context or scope needs to be done, you can perform that setup in the iterative process by selecting the scope link and then change the scope to the proper scope. So in this case, making sure you're in the proper legal entity for setups. The implementation project method is best suited when you need to modify the default setups, or you need to manage the project by assigning responsibilities of the setups to a broad group of users, and you want to be able to monitor the process. You can create a project, an implementation project. You can generate the initial list of tasks by selecting one of the enabled offerings. If you plan to use more than one, you can create separate implementations for the different functional areas, selecting an offering which automatically selects the offering core functional areas. You may also select none, some, or all of the optional functional areas of the offering that you're enabling. You can use your selection of the offering and the functional area as a template. A task list hierarchy is generated for the implementation project. The task list hierarchy includes the tasks that are associated with your selected offering and functional area, and you can see all their dependencies. Within a task list hierarchy, the tasks are organized according to the prerequisites and dependencies required for the setup data. Make sure that you enter the setup data in the same sequence as the tasks because you don't want to miss any prerequisite data. You can assign the tasks of an implementation project to users who are responsible for managing the data represented by those particular tasks. Typically, each task is assigned to an individual. However, you can assign multiple individuals to the same task if your implementation project requires that type of a management. Each individual has the flexibility to perform the task and manage setup steps independently of other users assigned to that same task. If you specify due dates for completing the assigned task, you can monitor the progress and the task assignment and the progress of the overall implementation project. If you assign multiple people to a task, you can assign the same due date to each person, or you can vary the dates if that makes good business sense. If you are a user who a setup task has been assigned, then a consolidated list of all of your assignments will be presented to you. Each task from the list, you can go in and enter the data. If you have a long list of assigned tasks, you can filter by due date, task status, or the implementation project name, if that makes it easier to manage. In addition, you can search for specific tasks in the list of task name. Again, remember that whomever has the task is going to need the proper security privilege associated to their roles and user to be able to get in there and get her done. The Action tab on the menu will allow you to manage the bulk update or uploading of information. If you do not see it, you can go to the view, click on columns, and then click on actions. That'll show up in the list. And you can do your data and export and import. So if you have a lot of data to bring in, that's probably an easier way to do it, to bring in with the CSV files. System will let you know if any rows are skipped, there's any duplicates found, so it does do that checking for you. The export and import processes can be used outside of the export and import pages in the functional setup manager. You can leverage the application program interfaces, or APIs for short, either the SOAP services or the REST API. REST APIs and the SOAP services are two different standards for web services. These APIs allow you to use the CSV export and import to invoke the process in the functional setup manager. So if you're moving from eBiz or some other system and you have the legal entities, business units, chart of accounts, and so on, you can leverage the web services to extract the data into the CSV files and then use the web services to pull that information into the cloud. For more information on the APIs, you can go out to docs.oracle.com, or you can go out to Oracle support and search for the setup, export, and import services usage. You can also copy your setups, so you can leverage the copy configuration functionality to create business units, then copy over the structure. You can start the copy process by selecting the existing setup configuration, pull that into the staging area. You need to make any changes, you can do that. And then you can submit the import process to create a new setup configuration. And you can review whatever's been created. All right, last section is on migration of setup data. So you may find that you need to move it from one instance to another. There's a couple different ways to do it. The classic migration migrates all configurations in the source environment, manually download the configuration set from the source and manually upload it into the target. You can preview the configuration in the target environment before applying it. The unified migration, you register the target environment with the source. Then you can optionally migrate only new changes if both environments are synchronized. You can preview the configuration in the sandbox instance before applying them to the main production instance or the main instance. And the system will automatically set up the target environment for import if the target is registered and available at that time. Importing it in the sandbox instance is applied to the target environment. And you can go out to docs.oracle.com and look up the Oracle Fusion Application Cloud Configuring and Extending Application Guide for more information. Within the setup and maintenance work area, you can export and import setup. You can do it by offering and functional area, implementation project. You can build in sequence task list, helping to avoid any dependency issues. Almost all of the cloud implementation requires moving functional setup data from one instance to another at some point in our life cycle. You might first implement in a development or test application instance and then deploy to production. After you've tested everything, you can move functional setup configuration of applications from one application instance to another by exporting and importing the data. Note that the instances need to be at the same code level. So here's an example going from production back to test. So if you get to a point where you have some of the production data, you can move that back into test and use that. You can also leverage so a golden copy is generally that one that we have just in case everything's set up and if something happens, we can leverage that gold copy that's going to have all of your operating standards for your enterprise. So it'll be your single source of truth, and you can leverage that. If a gold copy requires refresh from production, you can rebuild, export the offering from production into the gold, and this method will override any setups that were in there previously. Here's a couple things to remember. If a record exists in a configuration package but does not exist in the target, then the import will create the new record. If it does not exist in the configuration but exists in the target, then the import will just leave it alone. If it exists in the configuration package, picks it up. If all the attribute values are the same in both, then it does nothing. But if they are different, then the package will overwrite the existing information or update it. You can export the entire offering for initial migration or functional area for incremental maintenance. During export, appropriate setup data is identified. When you export setup data for an offering, the export definition includes setup data for all enabled functional areas and the relative features within that offering. When you export a single functional area with offering, the export definition only includes setup data for the functional area and the relevant features. The export data process generates different reports. You can review them in the application. You can download them for offline use. You can run the primary report, which shows the setup data that was exported. It appears in order of business objects and includes information on any errors encountered during the process. The setup data report lists all the setup data in the process configuration package and includes individual reports for each business object. And the process results report is available as a text file to show the status of the export, including the details and the errors that may have arisen. So here's an example, the comparison of the offering and the or functional areas. You can run it for both. We'll show mismatches. So if it's a mismatch in both, only in the configuration source, or I guess you could, well, one or two, but it'll show you any configuration differences so you can manage whatever happened. Using the import offering setup data page, you can upload and import previously exported setup. During import, the configuration package created by the export process is uploaded. All the data contained in the configuration package is imported into the environment or setup for the import. The offering and functional areas must already be enabled for the implementation before you can import setup data into the environment. In some environments, the feature selection is not selected. Use the feature configuration to ensure desired features are imported. Once you initiate the import process, you can monitor the process, check the status on the import offering data. There we go. You can use the implementation project as a source for exporting setup data when you are required to modify a list of tasks or objects. The task and their associated business objects in the selected implementation project defined or will define the setup, export, and implementation definition for the configured package. Depending on your needs, you can create a configuration package based on an implementation project. You can also modify some of the additional aspects, like excluding some of the business objects. You can change some of the default sequencing. You can filter some of the setup data that you want to export, just depending on what you're trying to accomplish. While the egg remains the same for each version, the setup data can differ. If you modify the data for time to time, then you may need to run the updated export process. Remember that each version of the configuration package has a snapshot of data from the source. You can compare and analyze the versions when you're getting ready to rerun the process. All the setup data contained in the configuration package is imported and you initiate the setup data import from. The target application instance or the setup import process, it inserts all the new data from the source configuration package that does not already exist, and it updates any data that is changed from the source. Setup data that exists in the target instance but not in the source will remain unchanged.